that I had an impact on her. And I think, I've had funnier and more outlandish, outrageous experiences, but that one has always kind of warmed my heart. So I like to carry that one with me.
Bienvenue. Welcome to Coffee Talk with King Francois I, where we will discover the tales, trials, and talents of Renaissance Festival performers, merchants, and die-hard attendees as we journey by way of lighthearted and even at times heartwarming conversations about the Renaissance Festival world. I am your host, Theodore Jander, aka King Francois I. Bonjour. Welcome to Coffee Talk with King Francois I, episode 18. I am your host, Theodore Jander. As was done in episode 13, Something to Help You Sleep 1.0, I am again bringing to all Ren Faire performers, merchants, staff, and patrons a little help for going to sleep. If going to sleep is a piece of cake for you, I also hope this episode will at least bring a bit of peace and calm to your day. For your listening pleasure, I will be narrating two short stories. First will be How Robin Hood Came to be an Outlaw from The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle. And second, I will read The Winter's Tale from Beautiful Stories from Shakespeare by E. Nesbit, which is a collection containing adaptations of several Shakespeare plays. But before we do that, here is the response I received from a friend and fellow performer, Rebecca, where she shares her coffee preferences and a favorite Ren Faire experience story. I sent Rebecca these 3 questions. I will provide the questions, and then following each question will be her response that she sent me. As a coffee drinker, how do you take your coffee, and do you have a favorite roast?
I usually take my coffee with just cream, no sugar, and I usually have a breakfast roast or a medium roast. I feel like I should be a little bit embarrassed to admit that I usually have K-cups at home. Nothing fancy.
Tell us about your favorite coffee shop. Where is it located, and what makes it your favorite coffee stop? What do you like about it?
My favorite coffee shop is a place called Java Cow. It's in Park City, Utah. I lived there about 20 years ago now, and it's half coffee shop, half ice cream shop. And there's a big statue of a cow on the ice cream side. And it's very cozy and very friendly. When I lived in Utah, I worked at the theater that was about a block up the street on Main Street, and I would go to the coffee shop before shows and stuff, and they were just really friendly, and it was nice to I don't know, Park City can be touristy, but it can also be really cozy and homey too, and that's what I liked about it.
I myself have experienced numerous and memorable encounters with patrons, cast, guest performers, and merchants. So, as a performer at a Renaissance festival, what is one of your favorite memories or two you would like to share with my listeners and me?
One of my favorite memories of working at a Renaissance festival, it's funny because I've done a lot of stage acts. I've done more work as a stage act than I have as a lane performer. But one of my favorite memories was when I was a lane performer. I was playing the village crazy cat lady at the Michigan Renaissance Festival. And, I wasn't wasn't anything scary or crazy. I was a peasant who carried bundles of yarn, and I had a basket full of stuffed cats and one cat that was like a puppet that I would use to interact with kids and stuff. And one day I was getting towards the end of the day and I was walking down one of the lanes, and I sometimes I wouldn't take the whole basket. I'd just take my cat puppet with me. And I was walking down the lane with my cat puppet, and I saw a little girl coming from the opposite direction. She must have been like, 6 or 7, and she had a little stuffed animal with her. And sometimes you just click with people, our eyes connected from across the lane. Our eyes met, and she came over to me, and I asked her about her little stuffed animal, and she played with my cat puppet, and we were just like, we recognized each other as kindred spirits. And I know that I had an impact on her. And I think, I've had funnier and more outlandish, outrageous experiences, but that one has always kind of warmed my heart. So I like to carry that one with me.
I thank Rebecca for taking the time to answer these few questions. Now, lay your head down or sit back and relax. Quiet your mind to dream of Renaissance knickknacks. Become burden-free by releasing your worries as you drift off to sleep with some Renaissance stories. How Robin Hood Came to be an Outlaw, from The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle. In merry England, in the time of old, when King Henry II ruled the land, there lived within the green glades of Sherwood Forest, near Nottingham town, a famous outlaw whose name was Robin Hood. No archer ever lived that could speed a grey goose shaft with such skill and cunning as his, nor were there ever such yeomen as the 70 merry men that roamed with him through the greenwood shades. Right merrily they dwelled within the depths of Sherwood Forest, suffering neither care nor want, but passing the time in merry games of archery or bouts of cudgel play, living upon the king's venison, washed down with draughts of ale of October brewing. Not only Robin himself, but all the band were outlaws and dwelled apart from other men. Yet they were beloved by the country people round about, for no one ever came to jolly Robin for help in time of need, and went away again with an empty fist. And now I will tell you how it came about that Robin Hood fell afoul of the law. When Robin was a youth of 18, stout of sinew and bold of heart, the sheriff of Nottingham proclaimed a shooting match and offered a prize of a butt of ale to whosoever should shoot the best shaft in Nottinghamshire. Now, quoth Robin, will I go too, for fain would I draw a string for the bright eyes of my lass, and a butt of good October brewing. So up he got and took his good stout yew bow, and 10 or more of broad cloth-yard arrows, and started off from Locksley town through Sherwood Forest to Nottingham. It was at the dawn of day in the merry May time, when hedgerows are green and flowers bedeck the meadows. Daisies pied and yellow cuckoo buds and fair primroses all along the briery hedges. When apple buds blossom and sweet birds sing, the lark at dawn of day, the throstlecock and cuckoo, when lads and lasses look upon each other with sweet thoughts, when busy housewives spread their linen to bleach upon the bright green grass. Sweet was the greenwood as he walked along its paths, and bright the green and rustling leaves, amid which the little birds sang with might and main. And blithely Robin whistled as he trudged along, thinking of Maid Marian and her bright eyes. For at such times a youth's thoughts are wont to turn pleasantly upon the lass that he loves the best. As thus he walked along with a brisk step and a merry whistle, he came suddenly upon some foresters seated beneath a great oak tree. 15 there were in all, making themselves merry with feasting and drinking as they sat around a huge pasty, to which each man helped himself, thrusting his hands into the pie, and washing down that which they ate with great horns of ale, which they drew all foaming from a barrel that stood nigh. Each man was clad in Lincoln green, and a fine show they made, seated upon the sward beneath that fair spreading tree. Then one of them, with his mouth full, called out to Robin, "Hullo, where goest thou, little lad, with the 1 penny bow and thy farthing shafts?" Then Robin grew angry, for no stripling likes to be taunted with his green years. "Now," quoth he, "my bow and mine arrows are as good as shine, and moreover I go to the shooting match at Nottingham town, which same has been proclaimed by our good sheriff of Nottinghamshire. There I will shoot with other stout yeomen, for a prize has been offered of a fine butt of ale." Then one who held a horn of ale in his hand said, "Ho, listen to the lad. Why, boy, thy mother's milk is yet scarce dry upon thy lips, and yet thou prattest of standing upon with good stout men at Nottingham butts, thou who art scarce able to draw 1 string of a 2-stone bow." "I'll hold the best of you 20 marks," quoth bold Robin, "that I hit the clout at 60 rods, by the good help of Our Lady Fair." At this all laughed aloud, and one said, "Well boasted, thou fair infant, well boasted, and well thou knowest that no target is nigh to make good thy wager." And another cried, "He will be taking ale with his milk next." At this Robin grew right mad. "Hark ye," said he, "yonder at the glade's end I see a herd of deer, even more than 60 rods distant. I'll hold you 20 marks that, by leave of Our Lady, I cause the best heart among them to die." "Now done," cried he who had spoken first, "and here are 20 marks. I wager that thou causest no beast to die, with or without the aid of Our Lady." Then Robin took his good yew bow in his hand, and placing the tip at his instep, he strung it right deftly. Then he knocked a broad cloth-yard arrow, and, raising the bow, threw the grey goose feather to his ear. The next moment the bowstring rang, and the arrow sped down the glade as a sparrowhawk skims in a northern wind. High leapt the noblest heart of all the herd, only to fall dead, reddening the green path with his heart's blood. "Ha!" cried Robin, "how likest thou that shot, good fellow? I wot the wager were mine, and it were 300 pounds. Then all the foresters were filled with rage, and he who had spoken the first and had lost the wager was more angry than all. "Nay," cried he, "the wager is none of thine, and get thee gone straightway, or, by all the saints of heaven, I'll baste thy sides until thou wilt ne'er be able to walk again." "Knowest thou not," said another, "that thou hast killed the king's deer? And by the laws of our gracious lord and sovereign King Harry, thine ears should be shaved close to thy head." "Catch him," cried a third. "Nay," said a fourth, "let him e'en go because of his tender years." Never a word said Robin Hood, but he looked at the foresters with a grim face. Then, turning on his heel, strode away from them down the forest glade. But his heart was bitterly angry, for his blood was hot and youthful and prone to boil. Now, well would it have been for him who had first spoken had he left Robin Hood alone. But his anger was hot, both because the youth had gotten the better of him and because of the deep draughts of ale that he had been quaffing. So, of a sudden, without any warning, he sprang to his feet and seized upon his bow and fitted it to a shaft. "Aye," cried he, "and I'll hurry thee anon." And he sent the arrow whistling after Robin. It was well for Robin Hood that same forester's head was spinning with ale, or else he would never have taken another step. As it was, the arrow whistled within 3 inches of his head. Then he turned around and quickly drew his own bow, and sent an arrow back in return. "Ye said I was no archer," cried he aloud, "but say so now again." The shaft flew straight. The archer fell forward with a cry, and lay on his face upon the ground, his arrows rattling about him from out of his quiver, the grey goose shaft wet with his heart's blood. Then, before the others could gather their wits about them, Robin Hood was gone into the depths of the green wood. Some started after him, but not with much heart, for each feared to suffer the death of his fellow. So presently they all came and lifted the dead man up and bore him away to Nottingham town. Meanwhile, Robin Hood ran through the green wood. Gone was all the joy and brightness from everything, for his heart was sick within him, and it was borne in upon his soul that he had slain a man. "Alas," cried he, "thou hast found me an archer that will make thy wife to ring. I would that thou hadst ne'er said one word to me, or that I had never passed thy way, or e'en that my right forefinger had been stricken off ere that this had happened. In haste I smote, but grieve I sore at leisure." And then, even in his trouble, he remembered the old saw that what is done, and the egg cracked cannot be cured. And so he came to dwell in the green wood that was to be his home for many a year to come, never again to see the happy days with the lads and lasses of sweet Locksley town, for he was outlawed, not only because he had killed a man, but also because he had poached upon the king's deer, and 200 pounds were set upon his head as a reward for whoever would bring him to the court of the king. Now the sheriff of Nottingham swore that he himself would bring this knave Robin Hood to justice, and for 2 reasons. First, because he wanted the 200 pounds, and next, because the forester that Robin Hood had killed was of kin to him. But Robin Hood lay hidden in Sherwood Forest for 1 year, and in that time there gathered around him many others like himself, cast out from other folk for this cause and for that. Some had shot deer in hungry winter time, when they could get no other food, and had been seen in the act by the foresters, but had escaped, thus saving their ears. Some had been turned out of their inheritance, that their farms might be added to the king's lands in Sherwood Forest. Some had been despoiled by a great baron or a rich abbot or a powerful esquire. All, for one cause or another, had come to Sherwood to escape wrong and oppression. So, in all that year, 50 or more good stout yeomen gathered about Robin Hood, and chose him to be their leader and chief. Then they vowed that even as they themselves had been despoiled, they would despoil their oppressors, whether baron, abbot, knight, or squire, and that from each they would take that which had been wrung from the poor by unjust taxes, or land rents, or in wrongful fines. But to the poor folk they would give a helping hand in need and trouble, and would return to them that which had been unjustly taken from them. Besides this, they swore never to harm a child, nor to wrong a woman, be she maid, wife, or widow, so that, after a while, when the people began to find that no harm was meant to them, but that money or food came in time of want to many a poor family, they came to praise Robin and his merry men, and to tell many tales of him and of his doings in Sherwood Forest, for they felt him to be one of themselves. Up rose Robin Hood one merry morn when all the birds were singing blithely among the leaves, and up rose all his merry men, each fellow washing his head and hands in the cold brown brook that leapt laughing from stone to stone. Then said Robin, "For 14 days have we seen no sport, so now I will go abroad to seek adventures forthwith. But tarry ye, my merry men all, here in the greenwood. Only see that ye mind well my call. 3 blasts upon the bugle horn I will blow in my hour of need. Then come quickly, for I shall want your aid." So saying, he strode away through the leafy forest glades until he had come to the verge of Sherwood. There he wandered for a long time, through highway and byway, through Dingley dell and forest skirts. Now he met a fair buxom lass in a shady lane, and each gave the other a merry word and passed their way. Now he saw a fair lady upon an ambling pad, to whom he doffed his cap, and who bowed sedately in return to the fair youth. Now he saw a fat monk on a pannier-laden ass, Now a gallant knight, with spear and shield and armor that flashed brightly in the sunlight. Now a page clad in crimson, now a stout burgher from good Nottingham town, pacing along with serious footsteps. All these sights he saw, but adventure found he none. At last he took a road by the forest skirts, a bypath that dipped toward a broad, pebbly stream spanned by a narrow bridge made of a log of wood. As he drew nigh this bridge, he saw a tall stranger coming from the other side. Thereupon Robin quickened his pace, as did the stranger likewise, each thinking to cross first. "Now stand thou back," quoth Robin, "and let the better man cross first." "Nay," answered the stranger, "then stand back shine own self, for the better man, I wet, am I." "That will we presently see," quoth Robin, "and meanwhile stand thou where thou art, or else, by the right brow of Saint Elfrida, I will show thee right good Nottingham play with a cloth-yard shaft betwixt thy ribs." "Now," quoth the stranger, "I will tan thy hide till it be as many colours as a beggar's cloak, if thou darest so much as touch a string of that same bow that thou holdest in thy hands." "Thou pratest like an ass," said Robin, "for I could send this shaft clean through thy proud heart before a curtal friar could say grace over a roast goose at Michaelmas-tide." "And thou pratest like a coward," answered the stranger, "for thou standest there with a good yew bow to shoot at my heart, while I have naught in my hand but a plain blackthorn shaft wherewith to meet thee." "Now," quoth Robin, "by the faith of my heart, never have I had a coward's name in all my life before. I will lay by my trusty bow and eke my arrows, and if thou darest abide my coming, I will go and cut a cudgel to test thy manhood withal." "Ay, marry, that will I abide thy coming, and joyously too," quoth the stranger, whereupon he leaned sturdily upon his staff to await Robin. Then Robin Hood stepped quickly to the cover side and cut a good shaft of ground oak, straight, without new, and 6 feet in length, and came back trimming away the tender stems from it, while the stranger waited for him, leaning upon his shaft and whistling as he gazed round about. Robin observed him furtively as he trimmed his staff, measuring him from top to toe from out of the corner of his eye, and thought that he had never seen a lustier or a stouter man. Tall was Robin, but taller was the stranger by a head and a neck, for he was 7 feet in height. Broad was Robin across the shoulders, but broader was the stranger by twice the breadth of a palm, while he measured at least an ell around the waist. "Nevertheless," said Robin to himself, "I will baste thy hide right merrily, my good fellow." Then aloud, "Lo, here is my good shaft, lusty and tough. Now wait my coming, and thou darest, and meet me an thou farest not. Then we will fight until one or the other of us tumble into the stream by dint of blows." "Marry, that meeteth my whole heart," cried the stranger, twirling his staff above his head betwixt his fingers and thumb until it whistled again. Never did the knights of Arthur's Round Table meet in a stouter fight than did these two. In a moment Robin stepped quickly upon the bridge where the stranger stood. First he made a feint, and then delivered a blow at the stranger's head that, had it met its mark, would have tumbled him speedily into the water. But the stranger turned the blow right deftly, and in return gave one as stout, which Robin also turned as the stranger had done. So they stood, each in his place, neither moving a finger's breadth back, for 1 good hour. And many blows were given and received by each in that time, till here and there were sore bones and bumps, yet neither thought of crying "Enough," nor seemed likely to fall from off the bridge. Now and then they stopped to rest, and each thought that he never had seen in all his life before such a hand at quarterstaff. At last Robin gave the stranger a blow upon the ribs that made his jacket smoke like a damp straw thatch in the sun. So shrewd was the stroke that the stranger came within a hair's breadth of falling off the bridge, But he regained himself right quickly, and, by a dexterous blow, gave Robin a crack on the crown that caused the blood to flow. Then Robin grew mad with anger and smote with all his might at the other. But the stranger warded the blow and once again thwacked Robin, and this time so fairly that he fell heels over head into the water, as the queen pin falls in a game of bowls. "And where art thou now, my good lad?" shouted the stranger, roaring with laughter. "Oh, in the flood and floating adown with the tide," cried Robin, nor could he forbear laughing himself at his sorry plight. Then, gaining his feet, he waded to the bank, the little fish speeding hither and thither, all frightened at his splashing. "Give me thy hand," cried he, when he had reached the bank. "I must needs own thou art a brave and a sturdy soul, and withal a good stout stroke with the cudgels. By this and by that, my head hummeth like to a hive of bees on a hot June day." Then he clapped his horn to his lips and winded a blast that went echoing sweetly down the forest paths. "Ay, marry," quoth he again, "thou art a tall lad, and eke a brave one, for ne'er, I bow, is there a man betwixt here and Canterbury town could do the like to me that thou hast done." "And thou," quoth the stranger laughing, "takest thy cudgelling like a brave heart and a stout yeoman." But now the distant twigs and branches rustled with the coming of men, and suddenly a score or two of good stout yeomen, all clad in Lincoln green, burst from out the covert, with merry Will Stuteley at their head. "Good master," cried Will, "how is this? Truly thou art all wet from head to foot, and that to the very skin." "Why, marry," answered jolly Robin, "yon stout fellow hath tumbled me neck and crop into the water, and hath given me a drubbing beside." "Then shall he not go without a ducking and eke a drubbing himself?" cried Will Stuteley. "Have at him, lads." Then Will and a score of yeomen leapt upon the stranger, but though they sprang quickly, they found him ready and felt him strike right and left with his stout staff, so that, though he went down with press of numbers, some of them rubbed cracked crowns before he was overcome. "Nay, forbear," cried Robin, laughing until his sore sides ached again. "He is a right good man and true, and no harm shall befall him. Now, hark ye, good youth, wilt thou stay with me and be one of my band? 3 suits of Lincoln green shalt thou have each year, beside 40 marks in fee, and share with us whatsoever good shall befall us. Thou shalt eat sweet venison and quaff the stoutest ale, and mine own good right-hand man shalt thou be, for never did I see such a cudgel player in all my life before. Speak, wilt thou be one of my good merry men?" "That know I not," quoth the stranger surlily, for he was angry at being so tumbled about. "If ye handle ye bow and apple shaft no better than ye do oaken cudgel, I wot ye are not fit to be called yeomen in my country. But if there be any man here that can shoot a better shaft than I, then will I bethink me of joining with you." "Now, by my faith," said Robin, "thou art a right saucy varlet, sirrah, yet I will stoop to thee as I never stooped to man before. Good Stuteley, cut thou a fair white piece of bark 4 fingers in breadth, and set it 80 yards distant on yonder oak. Now, stranger, hit that fairly with a grey goose shaft, and call thyself an archer." "Ay, marry, that will I," answered he. "Give me a good stout bow and a fair broad arrow, and if I hit it not, strip me and beat me blue with bowstrings." Then he chose the stoutest bow among them all, next to Robin's own, and a straight grey goose shaft, well feathered and smooth, and stepping to the mark, while all the band, sitting or lying upon the greensward, watched to see him shoot. He drew the arrow to his cheek and loosed the shaft right deftly, sending it so straight down the path that it clove the mark in the very center. "Aha!" he cried, "mend thou that if thou canst," while even the yeomen clapped their hands at so fair a shot. "That is a keen shot indeed," quoth Robin. "Mend it I cannot, but mar it I may, perhaps. Then, taking up his own good stout bow and nocking an arrow with care, he shot with his very greatest skill. Straight flew the arrow, and so true that it lit fairly upon the stranger's shaft and split it into splinters. And all the yeomen leapt to their feet and shouted for joy that their master had shot so well. "Now, by the lusty you bow of good Saint Withold," cried the stranger, "that is a shot indeed. Never saw I the like in all my life before. Now truly will I be thy man henceforth and for aye. Good Adam Bell was a fair shot, but never shot he so." "Then I have gained a right good man this day," quoth jolly Robin. "What name goest thou by, good fellow?" "Men call me John Little, whence I came," answered the stranger. Then Will Stuteley, who loved a good jest, spoke up. "Nay, fair little stranger," said he, "I like not thy name, and fain would I have it otherwise. Little art thou indeed, and small of bone and sinew. Therefore shalt thou be christened Little John, and I will be thy godfather." Then Robin Hood and all his band laughed aloud until the stranger began to grow angry. "And thou make a jest of me," quoth he to Will Stuteley. "Thou wilt have sore bones and little pay, and that in short season." "Nay, good friend," said Robin Hood, "bottle thine anger, for the name fitteth thee well. Little John shall thou be called henceforth, and Little John shall it be. So come, my merry men, we will prepare a christening feast for this fair infant." So, turning their backs upon the stream, they plunged into the forest once more, through which they traced their steps till they reached the spot where they dwelled in the depths of the woodland. There had they built huts of bark and branches of trees, and made couches of sweet rushes spread over with skins of fallow deer. Here stood a great oak tree with branches spreading broadly around, beneath which was a seat of green moss where Robin Hood was wont to sit at feast and at merrymaking with his stout men about him. Here they found the rest of the band, some of whom had come in with a brace of fat does. Then they all built great fires, and after a time roasted the does and broached a barrel of humming ale. Then, when the feast was ready, they all sat down, but Robin placed Little John at his right hand, for he was henceforth to be the second in the band. Then, when the feast was done, Will Stuteley spoke up. "It is now time, I ween, to christen our bonny babe. Is it not so, merry boys?" "And I," cried all, laughing till the woods echoed with their mirth. "Then 7 sponsors shall we have," quoth Will Stuteley. Then, hunting among all the band, he chose the 7 stoutest men of them all. "Now, by St. Dustin," cried Little John, springing to his feet, "more than one of you shall rue it, and you lay finger upon me." But without a word they all ran upon him at once, seizing him by his legs and arms and holding him tightly in spite of his struggles. And they bore him forth while all stood around to see the sport. Then one came forward who had been chosen to play the priest because he had a bald crown, and in his hand he carried a brimming pot of ale. "Now who bringeth this babe?" asked he right soberly. "That do I," answered Will Stuteley. "And what name callest thou him?" "Little John call I him." "Now, Little John," quoth the mock priest, "thou hast not lived heretofore, but only got thee along through the world, but henceforth thou wilt live indeed. When thou livest not thou wast called Little John, but now that thou dost live indeed, Little John shalt thou be called, so christen I thee." And at these last words he emptied the pot of ale upon Little John's head. Then all shouted with laughter as they saw the good brown ale stream over Little John's beard and trickle from his nose and chin, while his eyes blinked with the smart of it. At first he was of a mind to be angry, but found he could not, because the others were so merry. So he too laughed with the rest. Then Robin took this sweet, pretty babe, clothed him all anew from top to toe in Lincoln green, and gave him a good stout bow, and so made him a member of the merry band. And thus it was that Robin Hood became outlawed. Thus a band of merry companions gathered about him, and thus he gained his right-hand man, Little John. And so the prologue ends. The Winter's Tale, from Beautiful Stories from Shakespeare, by E. Nesbit. Leontes was the king of Sicily, and his dearest friend was Polixenes, king of Bohemia. They had been brought up together, and only separated when they reached man's estate, and each had to go and rule over his kingdom. After many years, when each was married and had a son, Polixenes came to stay with Leontes in Sicily. Leontes was a violent-tempered man and rather silly, and he took it into his stupid head that his wife Hermione liked Polixenes better than she did him, her own husband. When once he had got this into his head, nothing could put it out, and he ordered one of his lords, Camillo, to put a poison in Polixenes' wine. Camillo tried to dissuade him from this wicked action, but finding he was not to be moved, pretended to consent. He then told Polixenes what was proposed against him, and they fled from the court of Sicily that night and returned to Bohemia, where Camillo lived on as Polixenes' friend and counselor. Leontes threw the queen into prison, and her son, the heir to the throne, died of sorrow to see his mother so unjustly and cruelly treated. While the queen was in prison, she had a little baby, and a friend of hers named Paulina had the baby dressed in its best and took it to show the king, thinking that the sight of his helpless little daughter would soften his heart towards his dear queen, who had never done him any wrong, who had loved him a great deal more than he deserved. The king would not look at the baby, and ordered Paulina's husband to take it away in a ship, and leave it in the most desert and dreadful place he could find, which Paulina's husband, very much against his will, was obliged to do. Then the poor queen was brought up to be tried for treason in preferring Polixenes to her king, but really she had never thought of anyone except Leontes, her husband. Leontes had sent some messengers to ask the god Apollo whether he was not right in his cruel thoughts of the queen, but he had not patience to wait till they came back, and so it happened that they arrived in the middle of the trial. The oracle said, "Hermione is innocent, Polixenes blameless, Camillo a true subject, Leontes a jealous tyrant, and the king shall live without an heir if that which is lost be not found." Then a man came and told them that the little prince was dead. The poor queen, hearing this, fell down in a fit, and then the king saw how wicked and wrong he had been. He ordered Paulina and the ladies who were with the queen to take her away and try to restore her. But Paulina came back in a few moments and told the king that Hermione was dead. Now Leontes' eyes were at last opened to his folly. His queen was dead, and the little daughter who might have been a comfort to him he had sent away to be the prey of wolves and kites. Life had nothing left for him now. He gave himself up to his grief, and passed in any sad years in prayer and remorse. The baby princess was left on the sea-coast of Bohemia, the very kingdom where Polixenes reigned. Paulina's husband never went home to tell Leontes where he had left the baby, for as he was going back to the ship, he met a bear and was torn to pieces. So there was an end of him. But the poor deserted little baby was found by a shepherd. She was richly dressed, and had with her some jewels, and a paper was pinned to her cloak, saying that her name was Perdita, and that she came of noble parents. The shepherd, being a kind-hearted man, took home the little baby to his wife, and they brought it up as their own child. She had no more teaching than a shepherd's child generally has, but she inherited from her royal mother many graces and charms, so that she was quite different from the other maidens in the village where she lived. One day Prince Florizel, the son of the good king of Bohemia, was bunting near the shepherd's house and saw Perdita, now grown up to a charming woman. He made friends with the shepherd, not telling him that he was the prince, but saying that his name was Doricles, and that he was a private gentleman. And then, being deeply in love with the pretty Perdita, he came almost daily to see her. The king could not understand what it was that took his son nearly every day from home. So he set people to watch him, and then found out that the heir of the king of Bohemia was in love with Perdita, the pretty shepherd girl. Polixenes, wishing to see whether this was true, disguised himself, and went with the faithful Camillo, in disguise too, to the old shepherd's house. They arrived at the feast of sheep-shearing, and, though strangers, they were made very welcome. There was dancing going on, and a peddler was selling ribbons and laces and gloves, which the young men bought for their sweethearts. Florizel and Perdita, however, were taking no part in this gay scene, but sat quietly together, talking. The king noticed the charming manners and great beauty of Perdita, never guessing that she was the daughter of his old friend Leontes. He said to Camillo, "This is the prettiest low-born lass that ever ran on the green sward. Nothing she does or seems but smacks of something greater than herself, too noble for this place." And Camillo answered, "In truth, she is the queen of curds and cream." But when Florizel, who did not recognize his father, called upon the strangers to witness his betrothal with the pretty shepherdess, the king made himself known, and forbade the marriage, adding that if ever she saw Florizel again, he would kill her and her old father, the shepherd. And with that he left them. But Camillo remained behind, for he was charmed with Perdita, and wished to befriend her. Camillo had long known how sorry Leontes was for that foolish madness of his, and he longed to go back to Sicily to see his old master. He now proposed that the young people should go there and claim the protection of Leontes. So they went, and the shepherd went with them, taking Perdita's jewels, her baby clothes, and the paper he had found pinned to her cloak. Leontes received them with great kindness. He was very polite to Prince Florizel, but all his looks were for Perdita. He saw how much she was like the Queen Hermione, and said again and again, "Such a sweet creature my daughter might have been, if I had not cruelly sent her from me." When the old shepherd heard that the king had lost a baby daughter, who had been left upon the coast of Bohemia, he felt sure that Perdita, the child he had reared, must be the king's daughter. And when he told his tale and showed the jewels in the paper, the king perceived that Perdita was indeed his long-lost child. He welcomed her with joy and rewarded the good shepherd. Polixenes had hastened after his son to prevent his marriage with Perdita, but when he found that she was the daughter of his old friend, he was only too glad to give his consent. Yet Leontes could not be happy. He remembered how his fair queen, who should have been at his side to share his joy and his daughter's happiness, was dead through his unkindness, and he could say nothing for a long time but, "Oh, thy mother, and ask forgiveness of the king of Bohemia, and then kiss his daughter again, and then the Prince Florizel, and then thank the old shepherd for all his goodness." Then Paulina, who had been high all these years in the king's favor, because of her kindness to the dead Queen Hermione, said, "I have a statue made in the likeness of the dead queen, a piece many years in doing, and performed by the rare Italian master Giulio Romano. I keep it in a private house apart, and there, ever since you lost your queen, I have gone twice or thrice a day. Will it please your majesty to go and see the statue?" So Leontes and Polixenes, and Florizel and Perdita, with Camillo and their attendants, went to Paulina's house, where there was a heavy purple curtain screening off an alcove. And Paulina, with her hand on the curtain, said, "She was peerless when she was alive, and I do believe that her dead likeness excels whatever yet you have looked upon, or that the hand of man hath done. Therefore I keep it lonely, apart, but here it is, behold, and say 'tis well." And with that she drew back the curtain and showed them the statue. The king gazed and gazed on the beautiful statue of his dead wife, but said nothing. "I like your silence," said Paulina. "It the more shows off your wonder. But speak, is it not like her?" "It is almost herself," said the king. "And yet, Paulina, Hermione was not so much wrinkled. Nothing so old as this seems." "Oh, not by much," said Polixenes. "All," said Paulina. "That is the cleverness of the carver, who shows her to us as she would have been had she lived till now." And still Leontes looked at the statue and could not take his eyes away. "If I had known," said Paulina, "that this poor image would so have stirred your grief and love, I would not have shown it to you." But he only answered, "Do not draw the curtain." "No, you must not look any longer," said Paulina, "or you will think it moves." Let be, said the king. "Would you not think it breathed?" "I will draw the curtain," said Paulina. "You will think it lives presently."
"Ah, sweet Paulina," said Leontes, "make me to think so 20 years together."
"If you can bear it," said Paulina, "I can make the statue move, make it come down and take you by the hand. Only you would think it was by wicked magic."
"Whatever you can make her do, I am content to look on," said the king.
And then, all folks there admiring and beholding, the statue moved from its pedestal and came down the steps and put its arms round the king's neck. And he held her face and kissed her many times, for this was no statue, but the real, living Queen Hermione herself. She had lived hidden by Paulina's kindness all these years, and would not discover herself to her husband, though she knew he had repented, because she could not quite forgive him till she knew what had become of her little baby. Now that Perdita was found, she forgave her husband everything, and it was like a new and beautiful marriage to them to be together once more. Florizel and Perdita were married and lived long and happily. To Leontes, his many years of suffering were well paid, for in the moment when, after long grief and pain, he felt the arms of his true love around him once again. If you are asleep, I wish you pleasant dreams and a restful night's sleep. I hope you enjoyed this calming installment of Coffee Talk with King Francois I. Be on the lookout for the next episode, to be released on Friday, June 2nd, where I bring you my conversation with James Withrow. If you are a performer, merchant, staff, or diehard patron in or of the Renaissance Festival world, and would like to be featured on Coffee Talk with King Francois I, reach out to me by way of clicking on the following link provided in the show notes: www.theodorejander.com/coffeetalkpodcast. Would you like to receive early access every other week to each new episode, as well as receive a behind-the-scenes glimpse into the production and creative process for the podcast? If so, join the wonderful community of listeners supporting the show and making new things possible through Patreon. Learn more at www.patreon.com/Coffee Talk with King Francois. The link will be provided in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in to Coffee Talk with King Francois I. A bientôt. See you soon. Ciao for now and au revoir.